Chris Aumueller is the founder and CEO of FanWord. And if you haven't heard about it yet, you probably will at some time soon, especially if you're in the college athletics business or if you're any kind of business that is using forward thinking technology to do media work in the 21st century. Chris, thanks so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
Absolutely. We met probably about the time you founded this company. Former tennis player at the University of Nebraska, has at least a couple of degrees from our fine institution, and native of Germany, who came up with this idea, I don't know how many years ago, 7 years ago, that I'm going to change the world, right?
I mean, probably longer than that. It was actually during my time as an athlete when I first started thinking about this and at that point wanting to just give athletes a voice and help more athletes tell their stories. And that why, I guess, has never really changed. But yeah, I mean, the idea for at least something like FanWord of what it is today, probably
That's
longer than 7 years ago.
Yeah, that's the why as we understand it. Sort of, by the way, in today's interpretation of what the why is. But really, why did you think you could do this? Why did you think you could pull this off and make this happen?
Well, I think first of all, I've always had an entrepreneurial plug my whole life. Growing up in Germany and even being a teenage boy, always had these ideas of starting stuff and yeah, just being entrepreneurial. So I've always really loved that, or loved the idea of being an entrepreneur. And then, as I mentioned, when I was a tennis player for the Huskers, I just felt like that there were so many athletes with phenomenal stories that didn't necessarily get the spotlight or the attention that I felt like they deserved. And as I was kind of doing a little bit of research and started talking to some schools about their storytelling, I learned pretty quickly that many schools would love to give more athletes a voice and tell more stories, but just kind of struggled, finding the time and the manpower to do so. And that's really, when I felt like there was maybe an opportunity to help. And yeah, 400,000 pivots later, here we are. So,
A lot of lessons learned along the way too, I'm sure, right? Of how to
oh,
do this. So
100%.
I guess maybe we've buried the lead in some respects. What do you do? What is this?
Yeah, I think today we would describe it as a sports tech company, a software platform, if you will, primarily for communication teams in college athletics. And the tool that we've built, the platform that we've built, is AI powered and helps them write storytelling content more efficiently.
So then, who do you work with? Who are your clients, and what do you do for them?
So we work with about 150 athletic organizations right now. I would say 90% of those partners are college athletic departments. So yeah, from big name schools like Colorado and Oklahoma, Nebraska to a lot of mid majors, a Liberty University in Oakland, a Little Rock, a Tulsa, and then yeah, all the way down to small colleges like D2s, D3s, NAIs, and JUCOs. So really across every single level of college athletics.
So, kind of explain to us then, and what you do. The input of it. How does it work? AI generated sounds like that does most of the work. There has to be some
Mhm.
human element in it. What is the human element in what you do?
Yeah, totally. Can give you a little bit of the backstory. So when we first, started out back in 2018, not sure if you're familiar with the Players Tribune, but it was a platform that I was a big fan of and still am a big fan of. And at the time, it was pretty revolutionary because they were telling stories or wrote stories, first and foremost, about these like star athletes, LeBron James, Steph Curry, whatever. And they wrote these stories from a first person perspective. So it was just a little bit of a unique and different take on storytelling, if you will. And obviously everybody knew LeBron James didn't necessarily write that story, but for fans it felt like it came directly from let's say LeBron James. And I wanted to kind of mimic that and bring that to college athletics. That's really how FanWord started, if you will. And to this day, we do a ton of that storytelling. We started out servicing schools and wrote these feature stories about their athlete first and foremost, but also about their coaches and other stakeholders, former student athletes that turned pro, for instance. We've done thousands of these stories. And again, we still do a lot of that today. So it's still a service that we offer to partners. And it came to a point where we struggled to kind of keep up a little bit with demand because it was difficult to scale without technology. So when we actually started building the platform of what we call FanWord Assist today, which is that AI powered tool, we first and foremost actually built it for us to scale our own process of, how do we go about writing a feature story about, let's say, an athlete from start to finish, and where can we kind of find some efficiencies or create some efficiencies. And as we were building this, and schools started working with us again, they were like, well, how can you turn around these stories so quickly? So we showed them, and they were like, well, this is super cool. Can we actually use this? And we're like, sure. So we gave them access to our platform to use it themselves to write these stories more efficiently. And then they were like, well, this is really cool for feature stories. What about game recaps and player bios and staff spotlights and essentially other written content? And that's really how the tool has evolved. And yes, AI is an integral part of this. And training the AI and optimizing the AI is really where we spend, month and month and month of work of once again training the model and the technology, and that's really what kind of sets us apart today.
So you would you consider this here's a guy from a journalism college asking you questions. Is this fit into journalism, storytelling, marketing, all of those? Where does it fit?
Yeah, all of the above. So our customer is a communications team, right? So in college athletics, if you work in athletic communications, you are the storyteller of the school, and that's who we serve, right? That's who's using our product to save time, create more content, write more content. And yeah, so it really fits into all the categories you just mentioned a little bit. And we do have people in marketing use our tool. We have people in fundraising use our tool to write more content and stories about maybe alumni, and kind of build that alumni engagement and strengthen that. So there are some broader applications as well, but communications is definitely the department that we serve the most. Yeah.
So part of me would say, and I guess the part that's talking right now would say, what kinds of jobs that humans have been performing are being replaced by this tool, if at all?
Yeah, I look at it very differently.
Mm-hmm.
There's a very popular, I guess, saying that goes essentially on the lines of AI is never going to replace people, but people using AI will replace people not using AI. And I wholeheartedly believe that. We look at AI as a tool. AI is kind of the engine, but it still requires humans to be the driver. And a tool is completely useless without humans using it. So I personally don't foresee, of course, like industries will change and will be impacted by this, and maybe kind of the baseline of what's expected, changes with tools like a chat GPT, where you can maybe get some stuff done. But at the end of the day, it's just like a tool, like any other tool that was invented over the last 10, 15, 20 years. And you learning how to use it and take advantage of it to maybe do a job more efficiently and save some time and be more, essentially more beneficial to your employer. It's not any different here. So I don't think we're moving towards a world where anybody could just kind of replace, or any job could just be replaced by a simple AI tool. How you use it is really where then folks differentiate, and the specialization of a particular tool for a certain profession is really, I think, where AI, is incredibly powerful, or can be incredibly powerful, but useless without people knowing how to use it and use it the right way.
Yeah. And let's be honest, Chris, if you're working with a Division II program or a Division III program, there's probably one person on that staff anyway, and you're helping that one person do more work than that one person could do by herself or himself. That's really valuable in that just one little incident, or that one little example, right?
Yeah, you're spot on. Doesn't actually matter if we're talking to a Division I, or even a Power 4, Power 5 school. Or yes, to your point, obviously a small college where maybe you have one or two people in charge of managing 20 sports. But even if it's a Division 1 school and you might have 4 or 5 folks, the response is pretty much the same. Everybody is busy. Everybody's plate is full. If you have a weekend like a Friday where you have 5 games that you need to cover, the amount of emails that we used to get at like 2 a.m. or 1 a.m. in the morning, because they all have to write that game recap, for instance, after a game, like that's common across the board. And there's a lot of studies that came out recently about burnout and exhaustion and kind of like workload, particularly for communications teams. I mean, it's incredible. Like if you actually think about it, what these people do, and I have the utmost respect for them. But everybody is busy and everybody's plate is full. And these communication professionals, they aren't tied to a 9 to 5 or 8 to 5. They work weekends, they work nights because of the game schedule. And yeah, as I mentioned, I mean, we get a lot of emails, or did get a lot of emails again after midnight on a Friday, on a Saturday, for weeks, in a row, or month in a row even. And, us helping them save some of that time and maybe go home at 11 o'clock, is kind of, it's really rewarding.
Yeah, yeah. So I don't have any idea if you work with Nebraska Wesleyan or a school like that, but you work with the University of Nebraska, and I'm going to use those two examples because they're familiar with the people who are around here. Wesleyan is a Division 3 school,
3.
correct?
Mm-hmm.
And University of Nebraska is, whatever it is, one of the big dogs in the kennel, right? So give us an example, if you can, what you would do for Nebraska Wesleyan and what you would do for University of Nebraska's athletic communications department, which is massive compared to many other schools.
Yeah, so maybe a bit of I'm going to call it a bad example, but allow me to elaborate. So,
sure,
so both,
please.
So Nebraska Wesleyan was actually our very, very first partner ever.
Great.
About 7 years ago. So they have a very, very special place in my heart. We did not, we did, as I mentioned earlier, when we kind of started things out, we wrote feature stories, right, for schools. Nebraska Wesleyan was one of those schools. And as I mentioned, we still do that to this day. And we actually do that for Nebraska, right? So Nebraska doesn't use our software, but they essentially asked us to write feature stories for them. And we use our own software to streamline that process, right? So it's usually more of a premium service, if you will, because, Nebraska in this case doesn't have to even use a platform or use a tool and still get a lot of that content that you can produce with our tool directly from us. So they aren't using... Either of those schools are using or neither of those two schools use our software. But to maybe give you 2 other examples that kind of, answer that question, if you use a University of Tulsa, for instance, and a Division 2 or a Division 3 in that region, they have access to the exact same tool. And they both have full unlimited access to all the features. And it's really up to them how they use it, right? So if Tulsa has 20 sports to support and the Division 2 or Division 3 school has 20 schools to support, they have a very, very similar workload as far as games is concerned. They have probably similar amounts of, or potentially, the D3 might have a lot more student athletes than the Division 1 school, right? But, how they use it, if they want to use it to tell more stories about more feature stories about their athletes or coaches or alumni. It's all a matter of their strategic goals, right? But the workload of, let's say, games to cover and athlete bios to write and all that stuff is very, very similar, right? So we don't see much difference as far as, whether you're Division 1 school or even a JUCO or a Division 3 school, as far as that is concerned. But people get really, really creative of how they use it and what they use it for, which is really cool to see. But you can't make any general assumptions to say a Division 1 school uses it that way while the D2 and D3 uses it this way, So not sure if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. It does. And you started out in 2018, which is what you consider your birth year of FanWord, and you were the guy. You relied on students and other people. I know you hired some of our students. You had interns, but you kind of did this yourself mostly in the beginning. How much have you grown? How big is your group now?
Yeah, so today we're 13 or 14 people, but only 4 full time. So for us, it was always, we bootstrapped a lot, and tried to grow strategically, if you will. But you're right, of course, when this whole thing started out, and it was mostly me, and got some help here and there, obviously from interns and folks that helped write and interview and all that stuff, which was great. But yeah, the first full-time employee I brought on is now our CTO, and he was single-handedly the most important thing that happened to this company. And that's really when we got into the, more of the software and technology business, about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. So, yeah.
So does he know that the CEO and founder of the company considers him to be the most important person in the company? Does he know that?
I've told him that many times. I don't think he loves the spotlight, but he sees it maybe a little differently. But yeah, it's just a fact. So
yeah. So CTO, of course, is Chief Technology Officer, right? That's
correct. Yeah.
For the one person listening who doesn't know what that is. Okay.
Correct.
So, what have been the great challenges of putting this together? Of you probably haven't realized the dream, but maybe getting closer to realizing the full dream of this. What have been the great challenges of getting to this point?
Yeah. Well, I think first of all, the dream is to do this, right? So I think I am living that to some degree. But as far as challenges, I mean, gosh, the entrepreneurial journey in general, constant roller coaster, and for me as a founder, that's very mission driven and passionate about what we do. It's difficult to not, like you always say, or many people always tell me, like, don't let the losses, get to you, and don't ride too high on the wins. Like, try to keep a level head at all times, which is difficult for me. So obviously every loss, if you will, or every back against the wall situation has been a huge challenge, and I'm proud, not gonna lie, of overcoming a lot of those challenges and still kicking, and now obviously things are going better than they ever have. But I know there's a lot of folks that probably would have thrown in the towel, and again, I'm proud of myself and the team to kind of write that out, and now we're seeing the biggest growth we've ever seen, and the most traction and the most demand ever, and that's great. But as far as just like challenges as far as product or sales, obviously overcoming some of the perceptions of AI, particularly of people that may have used ChatGPT once or twice and didn't necessarily get the results they were looking for, or people that just have a general aversion to AI, and maybe folks that have done things a certain way for 20 plus years, and now you're essentially telling them, hey, you should do it that way. But I think that's normal, and we never criticize somebody for having these concerns and doubts. And in fact, we try to educate and help people maybe look at it from a bit of a different perspective, like when you mentioned earlier kind of or I guess I brought it up, the whole fear of AI, for instance, replacing people. I actually think that that people should be more, scared of losing their job or getting replaced by not adopting, let's say, AI, or going with the times, and just my 2 cents, right? So I think just having these conversations, there will always be people that are reluctant to change, or don't necessarily maybe see the value in it, and that's totally fair, and we respect that. But that has for sure, from just a simple product perspective, been the biggest challenge.
So the lesson really is that John Schrader doesn't need to know exactly how AI works, but he does need to know how AI can make my work and life better and more productive. Is that fair?
Totally, 100%. And I think there's folks sometimes, when they for instance use AI, they kind of, I'm giving a really bad example right now, but if you write an article that takes you an hour to write, and you use AI for that, and it takes you 5 minutes, to write, you can't compare that to the 1 hour article that, you invested, right? But you gotta ask sometimes yourself, what's the ROI of me spending an hour, let's say, on this article, right? So, and again, this doesn't apply to every piece of content, right? But there are articles that, whether we like it or not, you shouldn't spend so much time on, because we call it the time ROI just isn't there. It's not like 50,000 people will see that article, right? It's maybe 50 people, 100 people, depending on, sport, maybe, and like size of the school. And what we're trying to do really is just simplify that and help them also understand, hey, if you can free up 45 minutes here, right, and maybe the article is 90% there, right? Like we always tell them, our goal with the product is to get you 90% there in 10% of the time, right? What can you do now with these additional 45 minutes? Can you use it for other content or other tasks that you've been meaning to get to, that you can scale and just kind of, put on the back burner? Or is it, going home a little earlier and improve that work-life balance a bit, right? So that's a different conversation. But I think, to your point, you don't have to be an AI expert. You don't need to understand how it works. Our job is to make that as simple and seamless as possible and get you to that 90%, high quality output as quickly as possible.
When you get feedback from your clients about what we'd like you to do in the future, what you can do for us in the future, can you share with us what those kinds of things is that they think they need?
Yeah, I think so. So what we provide is already, and hopefully this doesn't come across the wrong way, but it's incredibly useful and beneficial, and really covers a broad spectrum of their at least a part of their job, their writing parts of their job. So improving what we've already built and further optimizing that, which can be, little things like, learn over time how to write certain things, so I don't have to make the same edits over and over, right? Stuff like that, for instance. Or can we integrate, let's say, a record book where you can read some of the records from the previous decades, and kind of gets integrated into, which is stuff we're already working on, and some of it already is released even. So long story short, it's about what we already provide, but optimizing it to save them even more time. And I would say 95% of our product roadmap is direct feedback from the 150-ish schools that we currently work with.
And you could manage to do another 150? Could you manage to work with every one of the 4,000 colleges in America that play sports?
We got a few more hands in here for sure. Yeah.
And
That's the
the rest
goal.
of the world, right? I mean, do you have international clients?
We had like 3 or 4 clients earlier this year, that used parts of our product, kind of as a pilot, that worked pretty well. But I mean, let's not beat around the bush. We are a relatively small shop. I'm a big fan of honing in and focusing on your main market, your primary market. So I don't want to be going after 20 different industries, seeing what sticks, especially if we know we have something that's really solid product market fit and helps serve the mission that we're really trying to become known for too.
Do what you do and do it as well as you can, and that
Pretty
works.
much.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Independently, without prompting, I had a conversation a few weeks ago with a gentleman, Phil Bergman, who works in Chicago at the University of Illinois, Chicago. And he uttered this, and I'm going to paraphrase this. He said, right there where you are, John, in Lincoln, Nebraska, are 3 of the outstanding sports technology companies. Huddle, of course, everybody knows that. And Open Doors, I think many people know that. And then he said FanWord as well. And people who don't know about FanWord, they should know about FanWord. He mentioned you in the same breath with Huddle and Open Doors. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, fantastic, obviously. I mean, let's not beat around the bush again. Like, Huddle and Open Doors are 2 of our big role models, and I think Lincoln and Nebraska in general is a fantastic, supportive community where folks really want to see each other succeed. I have great relationships with the people at Open Doors and at Huddle, and fully aware that we're nowhere near an Open Doors or a Huddle as far as impact and size. But that's what we want to accomplish, and we're obviously in a different niche and a different market, and yeah, we want to become known as the leader in AI for college athletics. And I think you can make an argument that we already are leading AI in at least college athletic communications, and incredibly proud and excited to hear partners, and Phil isn't even a partner, and folks in the industry, in this profession, bring us up. And the last 4 months, we've actually heard that a few times, like not just, obviously in the context of Nebraska and sports tech in Nebraska, but yeah, just kind of industry peers calling us kind of the leader in this. And yeah, I mean, gosh, we worked our butts off to be here, and we know that this will always be a roller coaster. There will be times where things will be, different again than what they are right now. And I think part of entrepreneurship is just figuring out a way through, and not giving up. And I think we have proven that over the years that we're really, really good at that. So yeah, hearing stuff like this feels incredible.
Were you a writer before you started this adventure? Did you consider yourself a writer? And if not, was that an obstacle at all?
So I'm not sure what my college professors would say. I don't think I would consider myself a good writer. I think I'm a decent creative writer. Or let me put it this way, I at least always enjoyed it. So I'm actually not even a big reader, which is maybe a little odd if you think about what we're doing. But I love to read stories. I love to read, storytelling content. So anything that kind of revolves around that, I'm a huge fan of. And yeah, I've always had a passion for it. Again, I like to write. It was a way for me in my early days and years, also to just kind of cope with certain things, writing stuff down, and just for myself, obviously. So yeah, don't think I would qualify as what people would define as a good writer, but yeah, I've always enjoyed it and still enjoy it to this day.
I asked you a minute ago about the challenges of this job. What are the great joys of this adventure that you're on?
I'm not sure how to put it in words, I guess, but yeah, I mean, it is. I like to feel things, and being kind of in charge of your own destiny to some degree, and building something from scratch. As I mentioned, it's always been kind of something I'm drawn towards and passionate about. And I think I don't know how I would do a regular 8 to 5, 9 to 5 job, and I know I would do well, but I just can't turn off that brain, just because the clock strikes 5 or whatever, right? Like, I'm especially not this. Like, I think about this constantly 24/7. I find a lot of fulfillment in just building this and serving. Now we are empowered the storytellers, right? So we empower the people that tell the athletes the stories day in and day out, and my heart's in it, and I love the impact that we're having on this industry and this profession, and consequently on the athletes. So yeah, just building it is really the joy, the journey, with all the ups and downs. And I won't obviously deny that there are a lot of hard times when you're building stuff, and this is certainly not for everyone. But yeah, I wouldn't have it any other way right now.
I'm the communications manager of John Schrader University, and I've heard about Chris Aumueller and FanWord. And now I'd ask you, if you would, to give me your 30 or 40-second elevator pitch about what it is you do and how you do it. Would you do that for me, please?
Yeah, I can do it probably in 10, but
Okay.
I would tell you that we build an AI powered storytelling platform that helps you write storytelling content more efficiently. So that's probably the easiest way I would describe it, and then I would go into all the other stuff. So
Well, that's pretty simple. You're hired. Thank you.
Okay, appreciate it.
One final thing, I mentioned early on that you are from Germany. You played tennis at the University of Nebraska. How did you end up in Lincoln? How did you end up here? And I know why you've stayed so long, but I'm going to ask you why you've stayed here
Mhm.
since you came here as a college student.
Yeah, I mean, tennis very international sport in college athletics. So for people to recruit globally is very very normal. And I was a decent junior, so I was on the radar of 6 or 7 schools that have reached out. Nebraska obviously being one of them. And at the time, we had a German assistant coach, Jörg Bartel, who reached out and just kind of wanted to chat. And yeah, first time we talked, I told him thanks, but no, because I already had my plans really laid out back home in Germany, which school I wanted to go to and what I wanted to do with my life. And then I started looking into it a little bit as other schools, approached me as well. I was like, well, maybe I should give this a second look and talk to a couple of friends that have done, college tennis. And yeah, I decided to give this a second chance or a second look, I should say. Talk to Jörg again, and then I had a friend here actually at Nebraska that helped my decision. And Jörg being from Germany, who could relate to maybe the culture and some of the challenges that international athletes face, made me feel good. I actually never did a recruiting trip, which is very unusual. So I've never been to the US. I just signed at some point and I said, all right, let's do this. And then had a very interesting first 72 hours here in Nebraska. But
You must tell. What is that?
well, first time really flying alone, or certainly to that extent to the US. Again, never been to the US. Flight was canceled. Had to kind of stay overnight in Chicago. Next morning, or whenever I did my flight and got into Omaha, I had to go straight to campus to do an English placement test, and had to do a math placement test without even, making it anywhere else, like no apartment or whatever. Was also caught off guard when I realized the apartment was unfurnished, so could have read maybe a little bit more back in the day. But and then you just kind of get thrown into all these international students and international student athlete groups and meetings and orientations, which was really useful and helpful because you instantly get connected to like-minded people that are going through the same hiccups and challenges. So it was just constantly nonstop, and I had no way to get a hold of my parents back in the day. So they were obviously worried and scared, what happened, until I got to a computer with internet, which at the time, 2008, was, I'm not sure if it was hard, but it certainly was harder than what it is today. And I had a German phone. I had no Wi-Fi or whatever on the phone. So long story short, it took about 48 hours before I could get a hold of my parents, and they were worried sick, but obviously all turned out okay. And now we're, still here 17 years later.
And let's let some folks know here that around the world, universities and colleges don't play athletics. And if they do, it's certainly not like we do at the scale we do here. So it wasn't as though you had a handbook or a template that said, well, I know that my university down the road does it this way, so I know what to expect, right?
100%. Like that's the beauty and uniqueness of college athletics. And like back home in Germany, for instance, it's almost impossible to combine university and playing sports at a high level because there's no infrastructure really in place to support it. Like the school is its own thing, right? That doesn't necessarily give an F on about your athletic career, and so you have to figure out your own way to coordinate things. And you have university sports, for instance, in Germany, but it's mostly like on a voluntary basis. And yes, there's some, I don't want to downplay it. There are certainly competitions and a competitive spirit. But, back home in my university, for instance, the guy who's a really close friend of mine that does university tennis at the, school back in my hometown, he's a full-time professor. And tennis is kind of like a once a week, a couple of hours, like 2 or 3 hours here and there on a voluntary basis, right? And there's 3 or 4 competitions a year, and that's it. So it's a very different model, very different system, and that's what I think makes college athletics here in the US just so incredibly awesome.
Yeah. And at what point did you realize, or you have to tell your parents that, I'm probably not coming home, at least not in that traditional sense, that I think I'm going to make a go of it here?
Yeah, I think at first, when I said yes, I want to do this, they were like, "Oh, are you sure? Are you sure?" And I was like, "Hey, if I don't like it, I come back after a semester." They were obviously on board with everything. They've always been supportive. They've never tried to keep me from going, I guess. But after I did my marketing degree, which was my first degree. Then I added another undergraduate degree, econ. They were like, "Okay, you've been there now for 4/5 years. Are you coming back?" I was like, "Well, I'd love to do my master's," and that took a little bit of a conversation. But again, they've always been supportive. So then it was 7 years, and then I was like, "Well, I actually kind of want to do a PhD." So I started FanWord the same time I started a PhD. And kind of like built things in the background a bit, and then got to a point 2 years into the PhD where I was like, I had to make a decision. And then, yeah, the company was built, or I shouldn't say built, it was started. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to finish the PhD, but I started a company. I'd like to do that. It's kind of, focused here on college athletics. So at that point, I probably knew, okay, this is going to change, and he's not going to come back anytime soon. But again, they've always been supportive, and at first maybe took them a bit to, shouldn't say accept it, because once again, it's not like they didn't accept it, but they had to get over it a little bit.
Well, you are not the first, nor will be the last immigrant, if I can call you that, who's created a successful technology company in America.
Probably, yeah.
We have an incredible tradition of that, and congratulations, Chris, on everything that's happened so far. I know the vision includes bigger and better things down the road, and thanks for sharing a little bit of what you're up to with us. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot for having me, John. Really enjoyed this. Thank you.
Sure. Chris Aumueller is the founder and CEO of FanWord. And if you've listened to anything over the last 35 minutes or so, you should have a pretty good idea of what they do. And it's right here in the heart of Lincoln, Nebraska, in the heart of America. I'm John Schrader, and this is Watch the Media.